Joining me right now from the beautiful state of Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp, who is in, the only way that I think I can call it is like a mask war. We've seen these happen across the country. We've seen it happen here in my state of Texas, and we've seen it happen elsewhere. And Brian Kemp, who has been he's been criticized by the media because he's a Republican, and he's been cheered by a lot of people who have common sense and who appreciate that there is a governor that sees the importance of allowing the individuals who are grown adults to make determinations about what they wear or do not wear on their face. But he is in a fight right now with Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms on masks, on the required wearing of masks. This among some other things he joins us to discuss. Governor, good afternoon to you, and welcome to the show. Thank you for your time today.
Great to be on with you, Dana. Thanks so much. I just would like to take a minute, if you'll give me one, just to really tell people what's going on down here in Georgia. We're working hard to protect lives, but also livelihoods in our great state. However, we have some of our local politicians that are playing pandemic politics, and they're wanting us to go back into shelter in place. They want to close indoor dining. And that conflicts with my statewide order that I've had out there for weeks and weeks now. And so we filed a lawsuit to stop them. We're standing up for hardworking Georgians.
Yeah, and hardworking Georgians, from what I hear, really do appreciate that. And the mask order and the insistence on the shutdown, I'm still trying to figure out on what science they are basing these demands, because, when I look at, and I've been following testing in the state of Georgia and the positivity rates and fatality rates. And one thing that really struck me, Governor, and we're speaking with Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, is that, for instance, the attention that swirls around your administration of the state during this time of pandemic is quite different from how I've seen other things reported. I know Colorado, Jared Police has been really celebrated in media for doing a great job. But as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Governor, Georgia per capita was administering more tests, and your rates were somewhat similar. And Georgia really was one of the first states to really get all of this under control and get on the other side of that so-called curve, flatten it quicker, and reduce fatalities. Tell me about this, because I feel as though the partisan coverage of this is preventing people from hearing what you did that worked in your state.
Well, it's really kind of sad. When we opened back toward the end of April to reopen our economy and to really fight two battles. We've been fighting a battle against COVID, and I agree with all the guidance that's out there on social distancing, washing your hands, wear a mask to protect people, and all of those type things. But, we also have to protect our livelihoods. And the way the economy dropped off, we can't continue that as a country. We're in no nothing like what we were seeing, several months ago. It's been 82 days since we reopened our economy here in Georgia, Dana. And this new wave of the virus we're seeing across the South and on the West Coast and then some other places, we're dealing with it. We have been planning for months for hospital surge capacity. We've ramped up our testing. I said this morning we've got to do more because what we're seeing right now. But we're holding our own and we're fighting hard. But to have local mayors that are going to circumvent common sense orders and guidance that was working, it worked before, it'll work again. We don't need to do more than that. We need to follow the advice and the guidance that's already out there. But to simply start jerking the rug out from under, dine-in restaurants and, telling people to shelter in place, that hurts small business people. It hurts working Georgians. It's going to hurt our tax dollars and collections and our revenue, which in turn hurts all the programs that you need in a crisis like this, whether it's health care, public safety, as we've seen. I know you've been following the public safety story in the city of Atlanta as well. We've had to call in the National Guard to help protect the citizens there. Because of just lawlessness in the city. And, when those kind of things happen, or when somebody's going to start, shutting businesses down, I'm just not going to stand idly by and let that happen. We have too much at stake here in our state.
Absolutely. Not just in Georgia, but elsewhere across the country. What do you say to those individuals out there who allege that, any kind of spike that they see, it's the direct result of the reopening, the way that governors and leaders in different localities reopen, as opposed to like the protest and then the riots, where I didn't see a lot of people wearing masks and I definitely didn't see social distancing. I have, however, seen some charts that show a very interesting spike 14 days after some of these riots began. What do you if you had to attribute any kind of increase to something, what do you say to those who insist that it's the reopening?
Well, the national media keeps saying that, and that's just quite honestly fake news. It really is. I mean, we've been open for 82 days. These cases, you watch the numbers 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. All the experts have said, well, if you do something today, you'll see the effects of it in 2 to 3 weeks. Well, it's been over 2 months now here in Georgia. Our cases continue to decline after we reopened. I mean, we had issues like everybody else did, but we're doing the things we needed to do to keep it under control. But if you look, something really happened, and I think there's several events that have attributed to that. Number one was the protest. We didn't see a whole lot of new cases from the protest, but what I think did happen, it sent the messaging of when that was happening that, well, it's all over. We can allow large gatherings. We don't have to worry about social distancing anymore. And people weren't enforcing the orders, especially in places like Atlanta and other spots around the state. But, you can see that spike start to happen in that same time frame that you just mentioned. But the other thing is Memorial Day. I mean, Americans went through a lot. We asked them to do a lot to help us build hospital capacity, and many people sheltering in places in some ways. We didn't do quite as much of that in Georgia as other states, but I mean, every state's different. I respect that of the governors. But people let their hair down after Memorial Day. I think they did on July 4th as well, because we didn't see a lot of cases, and people quit following the advice and the guidelines. And now we got to get back and hunker down again and follow that guidance that flattened the curve before. And I think, really all of those things have attributed to that.
Yeah, and it's good to see, so many areas reopening. And as you said, if it's just common sense and following, some the hand washing, which I'm kind of worried that maybe not everybody was washing their hands when I hear how people have to be showed how to do it. I want to get your thoughts really quickly, and something obviously that is related to Georgia, and particularly businesses in Georgia, because the economic fallout of these lockdowns can have just as disastrous an effect as health-wise, not just even economically. But one of the things that the Senate is doing is they're trying to implement legislation that would protect these businesses, small businesses in particular, from liability temporarily during this pandemic era. If you tell me your thoughts on that, and if you could have the perfect liability protection for businesses so that they could open comfortably without living in fear of losing everything if there's a spike or something else out there, and individuals being able to exercise their freedom and go out if they want to and patronize a business if they want to. In your perfect case scenario, what does that look like?
Well, we actually passed a bill in Georgia this year that we're doing the bill review on now that I hope to be signing very soon, as long as there's no issues with it from a constitutional standpoint, which I don't think there will be. But I think the protections are needed. We were talking about that this morning when we were talking about the Georgia bill, and there's homeowners associations that haven't opened their pools yet because they're worried about the liability from COVID. And it's unfortunate that we're in a place like that in our country, but I'm would certainly encourage the Congress to act on that, and I think it's well needed. It's I have in my executive orders protections for our healthcare workers and long-term care facilities and many people that are on the front lines of the virus that are having to make tough decisions in an environment. Especially several months ago, they had no idea really what they were dealing with, and the treatments have certainly gotten better, and we're seeing that our hospitalization stays are shorter, and that's really helped us.
Yeah, that's great news indeed. The severity of the cases seems obviously compared to right when all of this started, less severe. And as you just mentioned, the hospital stays as well. Last question for you. We're talking to Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia. You encourage people to wear masks, but it is not a mandate. You're leaving it up to each individual because they're grown adults. They don't need Governor Kemp but getting into their lives and telling them what to do every single day. I like your approach to this. What final word for you, Governor?
Well, like I said, we don't need a mandate in Georgia for people to do the right thing. Most
Amen.
people are following the guidance. Some of those that just absolutely don't want to do it, I understand that from a liberty and freedom perspective. It's what our country was built on, and I'm asking those folks, if that's the case, just socially distance yourself from people and be careful about where you're going when. If you're sick, stay home. And just help us flatten the curve so we can get back to some of the liberties that we all enjoy this fall, like college football games
There
and
you go.
getting our kids back in school and continuing to get our economy going. We have got to do that, Dana. I mean, it's going to be disastrous for our country and for our state if we don't continue to do that. And we've been very fortunate in Georgia. I mean, we're in a tough spot like everyone else, but our unemployment rate this morning was 7.5%. Where California's is 17.5%.
Yes.
And I think it's because, we've been very methodical in acting on the public health advice of Dr. Kathleen Toomey, but we've also been reasonable knowing that, government can't ask people to stay home, sit in their living room while they lose their business, not be able to feed their family. They're just not going to do that. So we have to have policies that people can believe in. And I believe that's what we've done here in Georgia.
Amen to that. And you've had some really good health experts around you as well. You mentioned Dr. Toomey, who just a stellar background. And really, Governor Kemp, I have to say, I've heard from so many people, some in our Georgia audience and elsewhere, who think that the way that you've approached this is really should be kind of the model for the nation. So thank you so much for giving that example, and hopefully other governors will follow. Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, God bless you, sir. Thank you so much for your time today, and prayers and best wishes for Georgia's trajectory back to normalcy.